Gene Trowbridge with the Trowbridge Law Group, and today on this YouTube video, and thanks for joining us, make sure you subscribe before you leave. Today we're going to talk about this topic. Does the rule on demo days allow private communities? I've been getting calls on this, and people want to know if they can set up some sort of a website and have potential investors come in, and then they'd offer sponsors to come in who pitch their deals, and then the investors would invest right there. So I think that's problematic, to tell you the truth, and I wanted to talk to you about that today. So the issue is private communities under Rule 148, which allows demo days. And this is all about selling securities. We're in a situation where we need to make sure we do our securities correctly and we don't blow our exemption. So if we're going to do a security and we're going to make sure that our security doesn't have to be registered with the SEC, it has to be exempt. And the best way and the most popular way of doing exempt securities is to follow Regulation D. And just for information, in the last 12 months that the SEC did their research, there was over $2 trillion raised in Regulation D offerings. And most of it was raised in something called Rule 506. Now, in 506, we have two parts of the rule. 506B is really the private placement part where you're using investors that you know. In 506B, we can have an unlimited amount of money raised. We can have an unlimited number of accredited investors. We can have up to 35 sophisticated investors. We need a PPM, but there's no advertising or general solicitation. So in order to defend yourself against a charge of advertising or soliciting, you'd have to know and show that your investors had a pre-existing relationship with you, meaning a relationship with you prior to your offering starting, and had a substantive relationship with you. That would be that you would know they were accredited or not accredited, and you would know that they had business experience enough that they could understand the offering and understand the risks. And then, of course, sophisticated is the 35 investors who aren't accredited. So I've just used three important words: sophisticated, pre-existing, and substantive. And we actually have a separate video on that in our YouTube channel called 3 Words, and we talk about that. But that's where we are. We're at 506B, which means you have to know the people before you can take them as investors. 506C is a little different. You don't have to know anyone. You can advertise, you can solicit, you can take as many investors as you want, raise as much money as you want, as long as all of your investors are accredited. So that brings us back to the issue of a private community and demo days. What I've seen is people say, well, we're going to get together on the internet, we're going to do all this stuff, and then people are going to come in and look at the offerings and probably invest. Well, that's okay, totally okay, if it's a 506C offering where you don't have to know the person before they invest and you don't have to have a substantive relation. So you can advertise, they can invest with you, and that's fine. The only catch is they all have to be accredited. So if you're going to put together a private community that's going to only be for accredited investors, that's fine, because you can do anything on social media you want as long as you're doing 506C. But the problem is if you're going to do 506B, and I just mentioned that in the last 12 months, the SEC said that there was $2 trillion raised in Regulation D offerings. Well, 95% of that money is raised in 506B offerings. So that's where most of the offerings are. That's where most of my clients are. And that's where these people who are calling me and asking me questions want to raise money. They want to raise money in 506B because they don't want to be limited to just accredited investors. So let's talk about Rule 48 and see what it says. Rule 148 allows something called demo days. And the rule is that certain demo day communications will not be deemed to be general solicitation. Good, because if you're doing general solicitation, you can't do a 506B offering. And so you can do this, you can have a demo day, and what you say is not going to be general solicitation if, and here's the caveats, if the meeting is sponsored by an institution of higher education, a state or local government, or an angel investor group. Okay, well, that's all fine. That's just not you as a sponsor. You're not any of those things. Advertising for the event does not reference any specific offering. So you can't say, well, I'm going to have a demo day, I'm going to have a private community, and at the communities we're going to talk about Gene Trowbridge's offerings or Jonathan Nay's offerings on self-storage. You can't do that. You can't charge fees for attendance. Now, you can have some administrative fee if you have to pay for coffee and whatever, but it's not like $500 so you can come in and you can be exposed to these potential investments for you. Nothing like that. No negotiations relating to the offering at that time. There's no transaction going on between the sponsor and the investor and seeing if we can come up with a different split or a different amount of money raised. Nothing like that. And no compensation for introductions. So if in fact there is a transaction that goes on, the sponsor of this group will not get compensated for it. So you can see what this is. An educational institution might want to, let's say, put together a day where they could talk about offerings that are in the marketplace on green energy. And they could have speakers from these offerings come in and talk about what they're doing for green energy. And then they could possibly have some contact information. So after the meeting, the people in attendance could talk to the sponsors and then go forward with the issue of, well, is there a pre-existing relationship? Is there a substantive relationship? And I'm going to tell you right now, at this meeting where you as a sponsor meet an investor for the first time and you have an offering, you're out of luck. That's not a pre-existing relationship with that client and certainly not substantive with that client. So that would be problematic for you if you want to stay out of the area of solicitation and advertising, which you have to stay out of if you're going to do a 506B and not blow your exemption. So people are using this demo day rules to hold private community meetings. And you need to get your attorney's advice if this is something you want to do. Are you planning to establish your own private community? Or are you planning on presenting your 506B offering to people in someone else's private community? I'm not crazy about this. I don't promote this at all amongst my clients, except if you want to do a 506C, I think it's a great idea. But in 506B, I think you have to be so terribly careful not to blow your exemption by being charged of advertising and solicitation simply because you don't have a pre-existing relation or a substantive relation. Now, if someone comes to that meeting and you do have a pre-existing relationship with them and you do have a substantive relationship with them before the meeting for this offering, then we have another thing to think about, and you better get advice from your attorney on exactly how you want to do that so that you stay safe. That's my warning to you today. Now, I have a book that talks all about the securities laws. This is the 4th edition of my book called It's a Whole New Business. And there's a QR code on your screen right now. If you scan that QR code, I made arrangements with the office to send you immediately a free PDF of the contents of that book. And if you go a little farther after scanning that code, you will get an offer to get a free hard copy of the book just for paying the shipping charges. So that's exciting. I want you to take advantage of that. And this has been Gene Trowbridge with the Trowbridge Law Group. We're securities lawyers. Be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel before you leave. We have great interviews. We have all sorts of educational videos like this. Here's how you can get a hold of us, our phone number, and our website. And thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.